board review briefing. What we're going to do is go through the two major types of boards of review. The board of review for the lower ranks up to Eagle and Palms, and that happens in the troop, and then the Eagle board of review. So we'll cover all of that tonight in the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. So we'll go through what the purpose of the board of review is, how to plan a board of review with the eye on the individual scout, how to conduct a board of review for the lower ranks, Tenderfoot through life, and then also Eagle Palms, and then any added considerations for the Eagle board of review. When we do boards of review, it's a good idea to step back and look at why we're doing this to begin with. What is the purpose of the Boy Scouts of America? And believe it or not, the purpose we're all here is not to create a bunch of Eagle Scouts. That's not the mission of the Boy Scouts of America. Might be a mission of some parents, but it's not the mission of the organization. The mission of the organization is to create good young men. And the way they state it is to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetime by instilling in them the values of the Scout Oath and law. Now, this is important to keep in mind as we have the young men in front of us in a board of review setting to see, one of our jobs is to see how well the troop is instilling these values into the young men, and give feedback to the program arm, which is the Scoutmaster and the Assistant Scoutmasters, of how well they are doing to accomplish the mission. The vision of the Boy Scouts of America is the Boy Scouts of America will prepare every eligible youth in America to become a responsible participating citizen and leader who is guided by the Scout Oath and law. So it's pretty much our vision statement is everybody is game. We're reaching out to all young people to bring them into the organization, either in Boy Scout, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, varsity, or venturing. And of course, venturing is co-ed, so it also includes girls. Okay, there are 3 books that every unit should have. Let me turn off that. If I can, I'm going to try to turn off that noise there. There we go. Okay, there are 3 books that every unit should have that relates to boards of review. The Troop Committee Guidebook, and that is this one right here. It has a chapter on how to conduct boards of review that happen inside of a troop. And then down here on the right-hand side is the Guide to Advancement. Now, the Guide to Advancement, for those who don't know, is the definitive guide for all policies and processes in the Boy Scouts of America that have to do with advancement. So it is the policy book. It is the definitive policy book. So, and it's written in such a way that it answers 99.9% of the questions that come up in units when you deal with advancement. So it's highly recommended that you either have a copy of the book or you know where to find it online, and it's available online at scouting.org/guide to advancement. So if you just type in your browser scouting.org/guide to advancement, all one word, you'll get to the Guide to Advancement. And it is updated about every 2 to 3 years. So if you haven't read it in the last couple of years, it's probably a good idea to read at least the sections dealing with the Board of Review, which is Chapter 8. And then the Boy Scout Requirements book, this book in the middle here. This book comes out every year at the end of January, beginning of February, and it has in it all of the requirements for every merit badge and all of the rank requirements and all of the common awards, like the 50-miler award, those sorts of awards. So it's all in one place. It's in booklet form, so you can bring it to a board of review in case there's a question about something. And it's there. It's handy, and it's available. All of these requirements are also available online in different web pages, but they're all at scouting.org/advancement. You'll find all the requirements. There are 4 steps to Boy Scout advancement in the Boy Scout program. The first step is that a scout learns. The second step is that a scout is tested. The third step is that a scout is then reviewed, and that's where you guys come in. So a scout learns something. He learns how to tie a knot, let's say. So somebody teaches him that. Could be anyone. He could learn on his own. It could be another scout. It could be the scoutmaster. Somebody teaches him how to do something. And then the scout is tested. It is the scoutmaster's responsibility to test the scout. Now, the scoutmaster can delegate that testing to anyone. He can, and this is for rank advancement we're talking about. He could say that a first-class scout in the troop can test another scout on a particular requirement. That's fine if he delegates it. However, the responsibility is still the scoutmaster's. That becomes very important as we go through this board of review. You'll find out how important it is that the testing is done properly before the scout gets to the board of review. And the board of review is this number 3 step where a scout is reviewed. What they're talking about is the board of review. And then number 4 is a scout is recognized. That's when the scout is after his board of review. He is then awarded normally a badge for the ranks that we have. It could be a pin, but he's recognized in some way. Okay, and what we're going to talk most about tonight is the scout is reviewed section step, which is step number 3, the board of review. For those of you who don't know yet, there are new Boy Scout requirements that are coming out for the different ranks in 2016. It's a reason to get on our mailing list because we're going to, when those requirements are out, we'll let you know what they are. We've already got a website that has kind of a preview of what those requirements are. But the reason why I bring it up is that these 4 steps are something that the scouts are going to need to learn for a requirement. It's one of the first requirements that they have to tell everybody about is what are the steps of Boy Scout advancement, and it's these 4 steps. So if you've never seen this before, it's probably because you haven't been to this briefing before. These steps aren't shown very often, but they will become very commonly shown next year, starting next year. And these are the books here that are referencing these steps and things for more information. And let me point out that if you start seeing things on the bottom of the slides, those are references to the rules, the policy books and the rules where I found the information that I put on the slide. So those are my references for you for further investigation. Okay, so we'll first talk about the general principles for the Tenderfoot to Life ranks and then the Palm Boards review. And later on in the presentation, we'll talk about what may be different for the Eagle Scout Boards of Review. A lot of stuff transfers from the lower ranks to Eagle Board of Review, and then there's some changes that make Eagle Boards of Review special. Okay, so the purpose of the Board of Review. The purpose of the Board of Review is to see how good of an experience the Scout is having in the unit and in the program. But one of your jobs is quality control. You want feedback from the Scout of how well he is doing in the unit. Is he happy in the unit? Is he enjoying the program? Does he have a gripe about the program? That's all feedback that he can give you, maybe that he wouldn't give the Scoutmaster because he might be too shy to do that. So he can give it to you, and as a committee person, you can then give it back to as feedback to the Scoutmaster. The other job you have is to decide if the boy is qualified to advance, and we'll talk a lot about how you do that. And then the next thing you do in your Board of Review is you encourage the Scout to advance to the next rank. So there's like 3 steps in this Board of Review. And find out how well the Scout's doing, try to determine if he's qualified to advance, and then encourage him to go to the next rank. And we'll break this down a little bit. The Board of Review date is the effective date for advancement. So what that means is if the Scout is going from a start of life and you're sitting at his life Board of Review to see if he's qualified for life, his effective date for making life is the date of that Board of Review. And so if you pass him and he gets he passed for life, then life starts at that night, and it will go from that 6 months then to before he can make his Eagle Scout. So because we want him in the life rank for 6 months. So it's important that you have timely boards of review, because one rank depends on the previous rank having a board of review for time in rank. So it is very important that you don't wait too long between offering boards of review. We recommend that you provide opportunities on a regular basis, and the policy is that you do it at least monthly, so that Scouts can have their boards of review, if anybody's ready, at least every month. Okay. Now, when do you have them? You have the Board of Review when the requirements are complete. So when his Tenderfoot requirements are complete, and that includes the Scoutmaster Conference, then you have a Board of Review. Now, it's whoever is aware of it. If the unit is aware, if somebody in the unit committee is aware that he has reached that milestone, then the unit committee invites him to a Board of Review. If the Scoutmaster is aware he reached that milestone, then the Scoutmaster lets the committee know, and the committee invites the Scout to the Board of Review. Also, if the Scout thinks he's ready, he thinks he has completed the requirements, then the unit committee invites the Scout to a Board of Review. Now notice I don't say the Scout asks for a Board of Review. It is not the responsibility of the Scout to ask for one. It is the duty of the committee to offer one. So this is coming out of the Guide to Advancement here. A Scout cannot be denied the opportunity. The Scout or his parents or guardians shall not be responsible for requesting a Board of Review. So that's the policy right there. It's not up to the Scout to request. So you can't sit back and say, well, he never requested one. You've got to offer one when he's ready. If you know he's ready and he's done the requirements. Scoutmasters don't have the authority to expect a youth to request a Board of Review, or to defer him or ask him to perform something beyond the requirements to get a Board of Review done. All right? You can't say, well, you can't do a Board of Review because you didn't show up in uniform 5 times this week or something. It's got to have to do with the requirements, and if he has passed all of his requirements, then he gets the board of review. You know, you can't say he can't be a Gopher Star because we think he's too young. If he satisfied the requirements, then he gets his board of review. Okay, it is for doing a board review, we would like to have the scout in uniform. However, it is not required. It's good for the scout to be in uniform. It's a formal occasion. He needs to understand that. There could be situations where, though, that a scout doesn't have an opportunity to get into his uniform. And that could include things like he's coming from a sports event where he is a baseball player or something, and he's in uniform for the sports event, and he's coming right to the meeting from the sports event, so he doesn't have time to change or to go home and get his uniform and put it on. And that would be something that we would consider appropriate then, that he would be able to be in the board of review and be in his sports uniform. If he's on a camp out and you're doing a board of review on the camp out, he may or may not have his Class A uniform with him. But you can still do a board of review with him. If the scout has outgrown the uniform or a piece of the uniform, you still have he still has the opportunity to have a board of review. You cannot require the scout to buy anything, any clothing, to attend a board of review. So if he doesn't have uniform, but he has some nice clothes he can wear, you just tell him, hey, you know, we know you outgrew your scout shirt, put on a nice shirt and attend the board of review. So, and that includes all the way up to Eagle Scout. If you ever participate in Eagle Scout boards of review, you see young men all the time coming in with a shirt and tie because they have long outgrown their uniform and their units may not require a uniform for the older boys. But even if the unit does require uniforms, if the boy has outgrown the uniform, he can still come in for the board of review. Now, you may have other activities he can't attend, not in uniform, but the board of review he can attend not in uniform, but in clean. We like him clean and neat for the board of review. In the lower right corner there, it says the scout should bring his handbook, and it comes in handy. It's something for you to look at to see if the requirements were signed off, and it's also a thing that you can sign after the board of review is done. Okay, so who's on the board? So this is the board of review for Tenderfoot through life rank or palms. So for those, they all happen in the unit, they all happen in the troop. And who is on the board? Well, we would like to have unit committee members on the board. If you don't have at least 3 committee members that you can have on the board, you could ask somebody else to serve who is an interested parent or something like that. As long as they understand kind of how a board review functions and what you're trying to get out of it. But at least one person should be a unit committee member, and preferably all 3. You have at least 3 and not more than 6 members. It's not an inquisition. We don't want this poor boy sitting in front of 20 adults getting asked a ton of questions. So it's supposed to be something that's formal but nice and not overbearing. So at least 3 but not more than 6 members. And then 1 member serves as the facilitator or the chair, and we'll talk about that and what that means. It's big word. They don't have a lot to do, but it is important to have 1 person that kind of fits that role. Okay, who does not sit on the board? the unit leader and the assistant unit leaders in a Boy Scout troop do not sit on the board. That means that the Scoutmaster and the assistant Scoutmasters don't sit on the board. The reason for that is because part of this thing, as we remember, is that we're asking the boy about the program. How do you enjoy the program? How do you enjoy being in the troop? How are the campouts? And he may not want to say something with the Scoutmaster there. So this gives him an opportunity to tell the committee things about the program without the people who are responsible for the program being there. However, in some troops, there is a tradition that a Scoutmaster or assistant Scoutmaster is in the room. There is no absolute rule that says they cannot be in the room. If one of them wants to sit in the room, they're to sit to the side and they are to be quiet. And they are not a voting member of the board. We would prefer that they just not be in the room at all, but we do know that some units, for whatever reason, have the tradition to have the unit leader in the room. We don't want other scouts in the room because they tend to distract the scout, and we do not want relatives of the scout or parents or guardians of the scout on the board. They are not as objective as people who are not related to the scout, and we'd rather have an objective board. So parents are out and relatives of the scout are out. Any of you who are involved with a varsity scout team, the varsity scout team's board of review is made up a little differently. There is a committee member who's responsible for advancement. That person's on the board. Then there's a youth member who is called the advancement manager, the advancement program manager. That youth member is on the board. And then the coach of the varsity team sits on the board. So that's a little different than in a Boy Scout troop. The composition of an Eagle Scout board of review will be discussed when we talk about the Eagle Scout stuff. This all comes out of Chapter 8 of the Guide to Advancement. Okay, when you're finding a time for the board, it should be a convenient time and location. And it's convenient to the adults that are on the board, and it's convenient to the scout that has to attend the board. So find a convenient time and location for everybody and offer the board a review then. Again, we would rather that you not have the board of review in the middle of the troop meeting, have it somewhere else, either in a corner or even better in another room, so that the scout is not distracted by things that are going around. And that's what that says. And then each rank requires a separate board of review. So if on the lower ranks, the Tenderfoot, second class, and first class ranks, you can work on all those three ranks at the same time. It doesn't say, you can't start second class until you finish Tenderfoot. Well, you actually can. You can start second and first class and work on Tenderfoot all at the same time. So it is possible for a boy to be ready for more than one rank at the same night. So in that case, what we would like you to do is to have a separate board so that the scout knows he is progressing from one rank to another rank. So you have a Tenderfoot board of review, and then you have a second class board of review. It is even better if you have different board members on the second board of review. So he actually knows that he is progressing ranks, and it's not just a mismatch, okay, you got 3 ranks at one time, good for you. Well, we would like you to do separate boards. Okay, time duration. Going back to the idea that this is not an inquisition, we would like the boards of review to be 15 minutes long and no more than 30 minutes long. For Tenderfoot to Life or palms. So the maximum on a board review is 30 minutes. Think about you having to go for your merit increase for your work by going to something called a board of review. It's got to be frightening. And just think of it being, and now you're 11 and a 12-year-old boy having to do this. It is very frightening for these guys. So don't prolong it. It's not an inquisition. What we're going to show you for an agenda does not take that long, and you should be able to get it done in 15 minutes for these lower ranks easily. Don't award the badge, don't award the rank until the you have recorded the rank at council, and normally that's getting it in an internet advancement and handing in the advancement report. And the reason why we don't want you to do that, to give them their rank ahead of time, is because we have run into cases over and over again where the scout is not registered. Now, this year we had a problem at council where they didn't register everybody quickly enough. But everybody should be in the system now. Everybody should be. If they are not, then call council. You got an issue. But you should be able to get them in internet advancement right away. Somebody's got a computer with internet access at the meeting. You could do it right then and there and get that paperwork in, and then get the rank badge and present it to them at the next meeting. And that you want to present him the rank at the next meeting, and then the card and pin, parent's pin, at the court of honor. You don't want to have a scout waiting for a quarter or more for another court of honor to get his rank. I mean, he's earned it. He's earned it after going through this board of review. So get it to him as quickly as you can, and for you, as quickly as you can is once you get it recorded at council and you buy the badge. Okay, so this is the agenda for a typical board of review, and we're going to talk about this step by step. So we'll start with before the board. So before the board starts, select a person as a facilitator or chair, and that person has a couple of jobs. The first job is timekeeper. Make sure that the board progresses quickly through things, that it doesn't take more than 15, 20 minutes to do it. And the other thing that that person does is they make sure, the agenda, kind of all the points in the agenda are hit. And then they fill out, make sure the paperwork is filled out at the end, so that somebody's going to submit the advancement report, someone's going to put it in internet advancement, somebody reports it to the unit committee and the scoutmaster. That's the facilitator that says, yep, you know, Johnny has done his star badge now, so let's get him in the system as effective tonight. That's about all the facilitator does. The other thing before the board is if somebody on the board knows a reason why the scout should not advance, that person should talk to the other board members and the scoutmaster at that time. You all have to agree unanimously that the boy is going to advance. So if somebody is walking into the board saying, I am not going to pass this guy for whatever reason, get it resolved amongst yourselves and the scoutmaster, and don't make the boy sit through an entire board review just to be told no at the end. It's a waste of your time, and it's really hurtful to the boy. So don't do that. Instead, you know, work. And I'll show you some ways that a board can say no. You know, what would cause a board to say no? And if you know this going in, then the best thing to do is to talk to the scoutmaster and get it taken care of at that level before a board actually starts. Okay, so the board then begins. The scout is welcomed to the board by the facilitator and the other board members. Introductions are made if they have to be made, so everybody knows who everybody is. And then very often in our council, we ask the boy to recite the oath, law, outdoor code, motto, and/or slogan from memory. Now, the reason why we do it in our council is because at the Eagle boards, very often they're asked that, and it's more tradition than anything else. It is not a requirement that they know this stuff by heart. It is a good idea that when they get into the SAR life range, they do know it by heart, because that's going to be the code of conduct that they're living by, and that again goes back to our mission statement that we want to instill these values into the boys. However, we're not testing them at this point. All testing has already occurred, so what we're doing is we're trying to ask them to recite these things and then talk about them, and it gives you a way of then talking about, well, what is the hardest point of the Scout law that for you to live by? Is a good question for a Scout. And what's the easiest? So those would be questions after the Scout has done this, to talk about, well, why do we want you to memorize this stuff? What's so good about this stuff? But you can't flunk him if he doesn't know how to recite these, or he gets nervous and doesn't recite them well. You can't postpone the board until he does it right. It's just not a requirement. Okay, we're going to review the rank itself. And what you're doing when you review ranks, remember I said, is he qualified to advance? Well, what you're doing is you're looking at the requirements, and has he completed all the requirements? You're looking to see if he did the requirement, and if he was tested by somebody who was authorized by the Scoutmaster to test him, and they passed him. Passed, we normally call sign off in the book. It doesn't necessarily have to be signed off in the book. That's the custom most troops use. What's important is that he was tested and he passed by somebody. So however you can verify that that occurred is fine. The board is not a retest. What you're doing is verifying that the testing has occurred by somebody qualified to test them. And that person qualified to test them is the person that's been delegated by the Scoutmaster. And the Scoutmaster can delegate anybody. So any authorized person, could be his 5-year-old daughter. Somebody the Scoutmaster has appointed to do the testing. If the Scout was tested by someone who was was delegated to test him, and was passed by that person, then for our sake, he has passed the requirement. Now, if he doesn't retain information, in other words, he doesn't know how to tie a bowline, he doesn't know the oath or law, that's something to feed back to the Scoutmaster, that the fact that the Scout does not know the oath or law, or he doesn't even, he doesn't know how to do something, but you don't test him. You don't go through the actual physical thing to test him. And you can just ask questions about it to try to determine whether or not he actually did it. For example, if one of the requirements is that he creates a camp gadget. It's a first-class requirement, and he's lashed together. Well, you can ask him, what was your camp gadget? Where did you do it? And what was the purpose of it? And if he says, I don't remember ever doing it, then there's a possibility he never did the requirement, even though it was signed off. So ask more questions to determine whether or not he really did it, or did someone just go right down his book and sign him off. If in the case where he never did the requirement, then you can stop the board at that time and say, well, you need to get this requirement done. go get the requirement done, come back, and we will complete the board. So that would be a reason to not pass a scout on a board review, is that he did not do a requirement. And it's your job as a board of review to catch those mistakes. By the way, this is not a new policy. The second paragraph here is a quote from the Handbook for Scoutmasters in 1938. I show this quote for a couple of reasons. One is that people think this is a new policy. It's not. It's been in every single Scoutmaster handbook. This was the first Scoutmaster handbook. Well, this is the second one. The first one was not really usable. But the one that, this is the one that Greenbar Bill wrote in 1938. And the other reason why I show it is it shows it's on page 980. So realize that if you're looking at handbooks that are Scoutmaster handbooks today, they're certainly not almost 1,000 pages long. And actually, the Handbook for Scoutmasters in 1938 was 2 volumes and over 1,000 pages long. So just be glad you didn't have to read all that. Okay, so reviewing rank advancements. The Scout must not be rejected at the Board of Review for any reasons that are not related to advancement requirements. So if you look at all the requirements, if you passed all the requirements, you did all the requirements, then as far as the Board of Review is concerned, he's passed. Okay? You can't flunk him for things that have nothing to do with requirements. An example here is he did not bring his Scout book to the Board of Review. Okay, so that makes a challenge for you to check the requirements. So you may have to ask him more questions about the requirements to try to determine if he did them. But he doesn't have to bring the book. You know, our recommendation, again, on the lower right corner, is that the Scout should bring the handbook, not must bring the handbook. There is no Boy Scout requirement that says bring a handbook to the Board of Review. Now, when you get into the Eagle side, there is a requirement that says you must use the Eagle Scout Project Workbook. So that's an example of there is a requirement there to use something. In this case, though, we don't have a similar requirement in the Boy Scout level. Okay. No council, committee, district, unit, or individual has the authority to add or subtract from advancement requirements. That is also something that I can show you in the original Boy Scout handbook. It's been around forever. It basically means we are not authorized to add or subtract from the requirements. We can't, for example, tell a Scout he has to earn the engineering merit badge to bake Eagle. We actually had a troop that did that. We can't say that a unit requires a Scout to repeat a skill at a Board of Review, tie a square knot, tie a bowline. If he can't do that, we don't pass him. We cannot do that because that's adding a requirement. There's nothing that says after. There's no requirement that says after you've been tested and signed off on this requirement, repeat it at a Board of Review. There's no retention requirement like that. And we cannot assume a requirement is complete if it's not signed off. So if we can't verify that a person has signed it off, we can't assume it's signed off. Now this says signed off in a book, because we're used to saying signed off. It could be an indication in scoutbook.com. It could be a check on some sort of poster with an initial along it. It could be anything like, you know, it could be nobody has signed any physical form, but you know, you can verify, or you know that Mr. Nelson has tested and signed off Joel on lashing, on square lashings, because you saw it happen. Okay, so you saw it happen, you knew it happened. It may not have gotten on any piece of paper anywhere, but the test was done, and Mr. Nelson says, yep, he passed it. Okay. Okay, the review rank or advancement, we're still in there. So questions that you ask rather than, tie a square knot. Ask them questions like, what, where, when, how. Like in the camp gadget. Where did you do your camp gadget? What was it? How was it done? Did you use square lashings or diagonal lashings? What's the difference between the two? Don't ask him trick questions. It's just wasting everybody's time. It might make you feel good that you know something he doesn't know. A trick question would be, who is the founder of the Boy Scouts of America, for example? And it's not Baden-Powell. That's a trick question. It doesn't really do anybody any good, and it wastes time. You only have 15 minutes to get through this. So feel free to use the Boy Scout handbook or other books for your sake to see what the requirements are that he had to get through to get to that rank. Now, Scout Spirit is a requirement for every rank, and it's important for boards of review to understand what this is, because this is one requirement that you get involved with a little bit. Scout Spirit is demonstrate Scout Spirit by living the Scout oath or promise and Scout law in your daily life. That is a requirement in every single rank. Normally it's a separate requirement, and it's normally signed off during the Scoutmaster Conference, but it can be signed off anytime. Scout Spirit, what this means is living the Scout law in their daily life, not just at meetings, not just at Scout campouts, but everywhere in their daily life. We don't count Scout Spirit by counting meetings or outings attended or anything like that. Instead, it's the way he lives that we're looking for. So one thing in your board review, you can ask the Scout to explain in his own words what Scout Spirit is. In lower ranks, you may actually have to reinforce it with him for him to understand what it is. And invite examples from him of when do you think you broke the Scout law, and see, so that he knows that, we're not all perfect, but we need to work on ourselves to be better. A Scout that has done something egregious could be in violation of this requirement and may not have passed this requirement even though the Scoutmaster has signed him off. For example, the Scout has been dealing in drugs, all right? That would be a breaking of Scout Spirit. Now, this is an example of, this going in, you need to talk to the Scoutmaster before the board starts and find out, does the Scoutmaster know? Has he put the Scout on probation and the Scout has passed his probation? Is there something, or is this something that's going to need to be put on probation? Or something like that. All right. So if a violation that is egregious of this requirement would hold a Scout back from advancement. Now, egregious is, like I said, it could be stealing, it could be dealing in drugs, it could be getting someone pregnant, something like that. It is not that he just swears every now and then. Minor infractions of the Scout law would probably not cause a Scout to be denied advancement. All right, but if he's a jerk, he's a jerk, don't pass him and then call me right before he's an Eagle, passing his Eagle board and saying, I don't want him to go to be an Eagle because he's a jerk and he's always been a jerk and he's never improved. Well, I will go right back at you and say, well, why are you making me the bad guy? Why didn't you work on this when he was a Tenderfoot in the second class and the first class? So that's why this is in here. Okay, attendance and active. There is a requirement that a Scout is active in his unit for a certain period of time. And then it's going to be, the scout's going to get signed off for being active, all right? This first bullet point here, the board's review cannot be held up because of a lack of scout attendance if the requirements are signed off. That means you can't hold up a board and say, well, we're not going to give you your board review even though all your requirements are signed off because you haven't been at the last 5 meetings. That's what that means. But let's talk about it, the requirement to be active in the unit for a certain number of months. So for STAR, it's 4 months, and for Life, it's 6 months. So the board needs to check, first thing to check is, has the time elapsed since the last board review to this board review? And the last time he was a first class, and now he's going to be STAR, has it really been 4 months? Or has it only been 3 months? Even if the Scoutmaster signs him off for active, but it's only been 3 months, then he couldn't possibly have passed that requirement. And in the case of not possibly being able to pass a requirement, he hasn't passed it, and the board can say, well, not enough time has passed. You need to stay active for another month, and then we'll come to another board and we'll hold another board. That's more common than you think. But active is also, a lot of people wonder, well, what is active? Because sometimes you don't see a scout for a long time, and then all of a sudden they shows up, he says, I want a board review. So how do you determine whether or not he gets a board review and he's passed this active requirement? Okay, there's 3 tests for active. The first is that he's registered. All right, if he's not a registered scout, then he's not active. So in a case where he's really is active, but he's not registered, go get him registered, and you can backdate it to the first of the year. But if you never seen him, all of a sudden he shows up and he's not registered, well, he can't consider himself active because he's not registered. So the first one is registered. The second one is in good standing with the unit, council, and the Boy Scouts of America. In good standing is defined as you haven't kicked him out. So if the troop has removed him, has expelled him for whatever reason, then he would not be in good standing with the unit. If the council or the Boy Scouts of America have done the same, he would not be in good standing with the unit. So test 1 and test 2 are purely administrative tests, and you shouldn't construe them as anything else. They're just administrative tests. Number 3 is it meets the unit's reasonable expectations, that he, the scout, meets the unit's reasonable expectations, or if not, a lesser level of activity is explained. So let's hit the first part of that sentence first. Meets the unit's reasonable expectations. That means that you have documented what you consider being active is, you being the unit. All right. We consider a scout to be active if he attends 60% of the meetings, 60% of the campouts, and attends 80% of them in Class A uniform. All right, you've documented this is what you consider as being active, and dues paid up or whatever else you want to put in there. And you've documented it, and then you have communicated it before this period of time to all the parents and all the scouts. So you have done your due diligence. You have communicated it, and you have documented it. And now there's no question of what being active as far as your troop is concerned. So either he matches that or he doesn't match that. Now it needs to be reasonable. You can't say he has to attend 100% of the meetings, and he has to attend 100% of the campouts, and he has to be in Class A uniform 100% of the time. Because then when it gets appealed to my level, we'll say that's unreasonable. So be reasonable. what's doable. And the definition of reasonable is somebody who is an objective outsider can look at it and say, yeah, that's a reasonable expectation. All right. Now, second part of that sentence is, or if he doesn't meet the reasonable expectations, a lesser level of activity is explained. Now, what that means is there are times when a scout becomes very busy at school or at church, and there may be things that he has to do for church or has to do for school or has to do for his family that took him away from Scouts. But those activities contribute to our mission statement. They make for a better leader, they make for a better citizen, or they were completely outside of his control. For example, he gets injured, or he has to take care of a sick loved one. Anything that's outside of his control. But even if it's inside of his control, if it's something that's going to benefit him, he's a member of marching band. Okay, well, he's sucked away for 8 months out of the year. That would be an activity that would contribute to our mission statement. He can still be a good scout. He can still learn things that we're teaching him, leadership, and put them to use in that other activity. So it would be an activity that would work for that. Now, if he's at home playing video games and that's what he's doing instead of going to scout meetings, well, no, that's not going to pass this check. So these are the three definitions. These are the three parts of the definition for active that you guys kind of need to look at when you look at active for your scouts. For more of a discussion on what a reasonable expectation is, go to Chapter 4 of the Guide to Advancement, and there's a whole section on how to do this analysis. Things like expectations of uniforming, supplies for outings, payment of dues, parental involvement, etc., and any other standards extraneous to a level of activity should not be considered in evaluating this requirement. So I made allusion to a uniform and I think dues, and I shouldn't have. According to the policy, is uniforming doesn't count and dues doesn't count. Parental involvement doesn't count. That he brings the supplies for outings doesn't count. It's not a level of activity definition as far as a Guide to Advancement is concerned. This is a policy statement right out of the Guide to Advancement. The reason why I know it's a policy, by the way, when you're reading the Guide to Advancement and you see words like shall or must, then it's a policy statement. If you see words like should, then it's a guide. This is true for the Guide to Advancement, and it's true for the Guide to Safe Scouting. So that's a way for you to know. Okay, positions of responsibility. There are things that we call positions of responsibility. They used to be called leadership positions. Now they call them positions of responsibility. Things like senior patrol leader, scribe, librarian, assistant senior patrol leader. For the Star and Life and Eagle badges, they require that a position of responsibility be held for a certain period of time. Now, those positions of responsibility should be more than just something on paper. They actually should be something that the scout does. The scoutmaster should be teaching the scout what his job duties are for that position of responsibility. The scout should then be held accountable for getting those duties done. If he doesn't get the duties done, the scoutmaster or senior patrol leader should warn him to get busy. If he still doesn't do the job, then remove him. If he has done some work and the time passes, all the time that passes before you remove him counts. If he does absolutely no work at all, and all it is a position on paper, then you don't have to count the position. The expectations for these jobs can't be impractical for the scout to achieve, and that's all. That's pretty personal as far as the scout's concerned and the unit is concerned. If the scout's not fulfilling his expected responsibilities, counsel him, warn him, and then if he still doesn't do it, remove him. The Scouts Master signs off on this requirement, and the Board of Review makes the final determination if the scout has achieved it. Merit badges. You do not review merit badges at a Board of Review, and that's all this slide is saying. Merit badge counselor signs it, and what's done is done. The scout has earned the merit badge. The only case where that may not be true is if it's impossible that the scout would have satisfied a requirement. Something like camping merit badge requires 20 nights camping, but he's only camped for 10 nights, and you know he's only camped for 10 nights, so he couldn't possibly have earned this camping merit badge. Well, but some merit badge counselor somewhere signed him off on it. The Scoutmaster is supposed to see the blue card at the end of the process, and the Scoutmaster at that point should be assigning the boy to either go back to the merit badge counselor or go to a different merit badge counselor and finish the badge. Because it was impossible for the scout to have achieved it, yet it's been signed off. It's just basically scout didn't do it. However, the Board of Review doesn't really get involved in it. Once you see the badge, by the time it gets to you, it should be good to go. That's what a blue card looks like. Okay. That's reviewing advancements. So at that point, you've reviewed the advancement. You know that he has done the requirements, and now we go on to the next step. Next step is to look at, talk to the scout about his experience in the unit. Listen carefully to what the scout's saying, because what you're looking for is anomalies in the program. How can you fix the program, or tell the Scoutmaster to fix the program? So what you're trying to find out from the scout is what's good about the program, so that the Scoutmaster keeps doing it, and what's not so good about the program, so the Scoutmaster makes adjustments for that. And maybe what the scout would like to see new in the program that's not there now. So ask him what's going on, and then ask him to repeat stuff in a different way, just to make sure that you really understand what the situation is, and then repeat it back to him to confirm your understanding, because you're going to tell the Scoutmaster that. When we talk about all this stuff, we're hitting at the scouting ideals. We want to review the scout's achievements and his growth in the ideals of scouting. Make sure he understands the oath and the law and what it means to live by the oath and the law, what his accomplishments are. Talk about leadership experiences as they get into the higher ranks. They're more responsible for leadership. Talk about school and what he does in school and how he brings scouting to school, and how he fulfills his religious duty. Don't be afraid to talk about what his religious duty to God is and how he satisfies duty to God. Discuss outdoor ethics, leave no trace, and next year there'll be something called Trek Lightly. And discuss the next rank plans with the scouts. Encourage him to go on and rank, and then end with praise. So at this point, the face time with the scout is over. It should only be about 15 minutes and never more than 30. At this point, dismiss the scout to go somewhere, and then you guys deliberate. And when you deliberate, all three members of the board, all members of the board must agree to advance the scout. Your sole basis for your decision is the scout meeting the requirements. So if the scout has met the requirements, then you pass the scout. There's no age requirement. You can't say, well, I don't think he should be Star Scout yet because he's too young. You can't do that. That's adding a requirement. You can't say, I just have a bad feeling about this kid and hold him up if you don't know for sure that he has not passed a requirement. You have to pass him on. So you're looking at the requirements. This is a requirements board review, and you're passing him on the requirements. And that's all that people expect you to do at this point. And so if he's passed the requirements, got signed off by somebody who was authorized to sign him off, then you vote yes, and he passes. Here are some examples of issues that could hold a scout up. A requirement was not signed off by somebody authorized. The kid may have learned it, but he never got tested on it. A requirement was skipped. He never even learned it. Somebody signed his book because they were just going right down books and signing. And they thought he did the requirement, and he did. So the requirement was skipped. Or it's blank in the book, and the kids say, yeah, I never did that. That was skipped. For Star and Life and Eagle, you have to earn a certain number of Eagle required badges and a certain number of optional badges. If that number is not right, then even if they're filled, they filled in some merit badges in the book, but they put a non-Eagle required badge in for an Eagle required badge, then there's something wrong. And unless it's, you get back to the person who keeps track of all that, or look in his book and see if the merit badges work out right, it could be that he just needs another Eagles merit badge before he can advance to like a Star rank or a Life rank. So the list of merit badges earned is incorrect. That could hold him back. The Scoutmaster signs the scout off as active for 6 months, but the scout was only active for 5 months. This is my Scoutmaster doesn't know how to read a calendar problem. It happens a lot, and one of your jobs is to catch that. And then a very serious incident that would cause scout spirit requirement not to be met, and we talked about that. Another example is a scout did not complete a requirement even though it was signed off. We talked about that earlier. So those are examples of when you can say no, you're not ready because something was wrong with advancement, okay, with requirements. If the board decides not to approve, then you can do a couple of things. If it's a simple thing like he really never did learn how to tie a bowline. Nobody ever taught him. He was never tested. You could say, okay, go over there, talk to your senior patrol leader, get someone to teach you how to tie a bowline, and get tested for it. And if your Scoutmaster thinks you're good enough to go, then you can come back. And we'll just wait here for you to the end of the meeting. And maybe a bowline's not a good example, or maybe something simple, like a spur knot or something. So for a very simple thing, you could like adjourn and reconvene, and you don't really need any paperwork for that. But if you're going to adjourn and reconvene days or weeks later, you're going to need to tell the scout specifically what it is he needs to do to satisfy the board, and write it down. And you tell the scout, and you put it in a letter that goes to the scout and the parents, and a copy of it goes to the committee, so that when the board reconvenes, everybody knows what it is the scout was supposed to do. So if it's like, well, you never did go on these campouts, so you need to finish your campouts, that's going to take a while. So write it down, send a letter to the parent and the scout that says, hey, this is what you got to do. So everybody is clear, and then once they have the board reconvenes, they say, well, he's done everything else. We're just looking at now at the campouts. What's the campouts done? If the scout or his parent or guardian disagrees with a negative decision, they can appeal for certain ranks. So let's go through which one. So the Tenderfoot second class, first class, and Eagle Palms, they cannot appeal. So if the board says no on any of those ranks, then the boy has to do whatever the board says and get them done. Come back and get another board review after the requirements are done. For star and life ranks, they can be appealed to the local council. And I'll show you an email address at the end where you can start that process. For the Eagle Scout rank, it's appealable to national, and in the guide to advancement, there is a section 8041. It starts pointing you to the appeal process. So that whole process on how to do appeals is in that guide to advancement, section 8. It should be very, very rare that you say no. If you have a troop that says no at the board review, more than 10% of the time, then it's too much. Something's wrong with the way the process is happening. The board saying no at a board review should be very, very rare. Okay, scouts invited back for results. Once you've deliberated, you invite the scout back. You be friendly no matter what the decision is. Congratulate the scout, encourage the scout if it's positive. Tell him that he's going to get his recognition as soon as possible, hopefully at the next meeting, and encourage him to advance. The facilitator informs the scoutmaster and the committee of the results so that they can process it, and they communicate the program issues to the scoutmaster and committee so that they can improve the program. The committee then after that files the advancement report via internet advancement and purchase a rank badge to give to the scoutmaster so the scout gets it. All right, let's quickly go through the Eagle boards of review. These slides are actually a lot shorter because we take most of what's in the other rank boards of review with some changes. Eagle boards of review are in the guide to advancement in section 8 as well. The makeup of the board is different. There are 3 members on the board and not more than 6, just like in a troop board review. And all must be 21 years old. That's true for the troop as well. At least one member, though, is a district or council representative. So he's either a member of the district or he's a member of the council, and he's there representing the council or district. The other people can be district or council members, or they can be just interested citizens. Someone from the Eagle Candidates Unit should be auditing the board, so it should be in the room. They should not speak unless specifically asked a question, and they're there more as a witness because when the board adjourns, they can take back to the unit anything that was discussed. That person should not be a relative or guardian of the candidate for obvious reasons. And normally, an Eagle board of review is around 30 minutes in length and should not go beyond 45 minutes. It's not an inquisition. And I'll show you, we'll talk about the agenda for that. The Eagle board of review occurs after the council or district has verified the application, just to make sure that the scout's registered and the right badges are there and the dates look right, that kind of stuff. The Eagle board chair works with all involved parties to schedule the date and time and place of the board of review. Often, most districts have them occur once a month. But a scout candidate can ask can ask the district to hold a board outside of regularly scheduled times, and if they can find a convenient time for that, it should be held. If the district can find a convenient time for that, it should be held. Board of review cannot be denied or postponed due to unresponsive references. Sometimes people are very slow to give references, and the calendar is clicking, and the boy is getting older, and we can't have him miss his dates because the references are just not coming. So even if you don't get all of the references, you still hold the board of review. You take into consideration the fact that for whatever reason, you didn't get a response from a reference. If a unit leader or unit committee fails to approve an application, and it does happen, the candidate is still granted a board of review, but the lack of approval may be considered in the decision. And this is called a board of review under disputed circumstances. So it could be that the unit committee refuses to sign the Eagle application. It could be the scoutmaster, for whatever reason, refuses to sign the Eagle application. But the scout feels that he has completed all the requirements. And it's just like the other board. If the scout feels he has completed all the requirements, we have to give him the opportunity to have a board of review. You take under consideration why that the fact that the scoutmaster hasn't signed, and the scoutmaster's doesn't think he should be advancing, but you still have the board. The outline of how to put that on is in the guide to advancement, and it's called a board of review under disputed circumstances. And there's a whole outline there of how to put on such a board. All requirements, including the Scoutmaster Conference, must be completed before his age 18, before his 18th birthday. However, the paperwork, getting that stuff all put together, and the board of review itself may be done after he's 18. And there's some time limits here. So within 3 months after he's 18, there's no special approval by anybody. He can just have his board of review. Between 3 months and 6 months, the districts can approve the board of review extension. So, and the CAC is the Council Advancement Committee. The Council Advancement Committee has delegated it to the districts and said, yes, you can go ahead and extend it automatically to 6 months. So it's a district decision. If after 6 months he still hasn't had his board of review for whatever reason, then it has to go to council and notify me, because I have to then appeal it to national, and national has to give us permission to have the board of review. For adults who completed all the requirements, so this is like beyond 6 months, if the scout has done all of the requirements as a youth, there is a thing called a belated application. We've processed a couple of them this year, and the adult can get the award. Sometimes the boy never files the paperwork, but he's done all the requirements. And he can prove he's done all the requirements. That's the kicker there. He has to prove he's done all the requirements. And if he does, then he can prove it, then we can award him the Eagle. Okay, so here's the agenda for Eagle Board. It's a pre-board, means everybody gets together at the board and looks at the project documentation, reviews the application, all that stuff. And that's a 10 to 30 minute, it all depends on the project size and things, but usually about 10 minutes worth of work before the board starts. And then the boy is brought in and there's introductions. It is very often in our council, the boy is asked to recite the oath, law, model, slogan, and outdoor code. Again, you can't flunk him because he doesn't complete one of those. But it gives you a segue into discussing the mission statements and the values of Scouting. Then normally the scout presents what he did in his project and how he showed leadership on the project. And so there's a discussion with the scout and the board talking about his project and Was it difficult? What was difficult about it? If he had to do it over again, what would he change? And how did he show leadership on the project? Because you have to make a determination that it's a good leadership project. So it was about a 10-minute discussion on that, and then 15 minutes worth of reviewing the scouting experience, campouts he's been on, leadership's experience inside and outside of the scouting, what he wants to do in the future, how he's going to give back to scouting, that sort of thing, and talking about the values of being an Eagle. What does it mean to be an Eagle? So that's the agenda. You don't have to stick to these times, but you want to make sure that everything in FaceTime doesn't exceed 45 minutes. You keep it around 30 minutes. Then you excuse the scout, just like you do in a troop board review. The board deliberates. They have to be unanimous, just like in a troop board review. And the criteria is, did he do the requirements? If he did the requirements, then he has advanced the rank. Eagle Scout candidates only have one board review, although it can be adjourned and reconvened. Any subsequent action after that board review, like he fails it, the only thing he can do at that point is appeal. The appeal process we talked about already, and it's outlined in Chapter 8 of the Guide to Advancement. So he appeals it. The Eagle Scout medal or patch must not be obtained nor a court of honor scheduled until after the certificate and other credentials are received at the council office from National. And the reason for that is paperwork does tend to get lost or misplaced and have to be found. And we don't want to see scouts being awarded something before the official certificate comes in from National, and we don't want people flying in from back east to go to courts of honor just to have the courts of honor postponed because you don't have anything to award them. And so you can't really acquire the Eagle Medal without the certificate or without verification from the council office that we have received the certificate. There's no more than one candidate may receive credit for working on a project. These are some misconceptions about Eagle stuff. Two boys can't work on a project and say, okay, we're going to put up a statue and it's so much work that we're going to have two scouts do it, and those two scouts then will get 2 Eagle projects out of it, and we will have 2 Eagles out of it. You can't do that, but you can divide things if there's a way of dividing it physically and say, okay, you work the base of the statue, whatever that's called, the platform the statue sits on. Your job and your project is to build that base, all right, and clear the land and do whatever you have to do for lighting on the base or whatever. And then the other guy's job is to build the statue. So you've divided a big project into 2 component parts that are really 2 separate projects. You can do that. But you can't have one scout, we can't have 2 scouts working on the same project and get credit for it. There is no requirement that a project must have lasting value. There's a rumor out there that projects have to have lasting value. It's not true. It never was true. So there's no requirement that a project have lasting value. And there is no retesting at the board of review. Just like we didn't have retesting for any other rank, we don't have retesting for the Eagle rank either. Never did, by the way. That was never an official policy to have retesting. Councils, districts, and units shall not establish requirements for the number of people who led a project. So we can't say you only have 100 people lead it, or we won't count it as an Eagle project. Okay. In the Guide to Advancement from last night, we know now that the minimum number of people for a project is 2 people and the scout. All right, that's minimum. But really, the how many people does it take to get the project done? And that's what you do. That's how many people you need to get the project done. You don't need a ton of people. If it's something that, a handful of people can get done and still a good service project and giving the beneficiary good service. So we can't say, none of us can say what is the minimum number of requirements for the number of people led to be considered as a project, or the makeup of those people, that, that they are all scouts or whatever, nor the time worked on a project. There is no 100-hour minimum or anything like that. It takes what it takes to get the job done as proposed, and that's all we really care about. Don't expect scouts from different backgrounds with different experiences and different needs to work towards a standard. A good example is that I saw happen over the last couple of months is people were gathering water bottles for homeless shelters. And one kid was really ingenious, and he put a lot of flyers out in businesses and had people drop off water at businesses. Okay, so his leadership was a little light because he had people going out to the businesses and talking with managers and putting out flyers. That's still leadership to delegate that and to get them trained and motivated to do that, and then they do that. And the other scout did the store-to-door thing, and then he found he couldn't get enough, so he did some car washes to buy some, and then he did some begging for people. He had people go out and ask for donations. So, so he kind of struggled on his side. A lot of leadership there. He did, and then a lot of reworking the project, at least on the ground level, trying to get the thing to work. The kid that did the business one, he got tons of water. So if I was going to rank a project for the amount of water delivered, he would have blown everybody away. I mean, he got a whole garage full of water. And the other kid, he got a lot of water, but he didn't get a garage full of water. So they both learned something. They both benefited from their projects. Completely different results from the projects, but they were both perfectly good Eagle projects, and the beneficiaries on both sides were very glad that it occurred. So it gives you an idea that scouts are different. Everybody's different. They have different personalities. They approach problem solving differently, and you're going to end up with kind of a different project. So it's kind of hard to make standards, really. Again, there's no minimum amount of time on projects. There's no 100-hour minimum. There's no any hour minimum. Don't communicate an average amount of time, because that infers a minimum. Scouts aren't stupid. If you say the average amount of time in our district for an Eagle project is 300 hours, then they're going to work towards a 300-hour minimum. And that's exactly what we don't want them to do. What we want them to do is we want them to find a project that shows good leadership and good service to a beneficiary and something that they'd be proud of, and then they work that project to completion, and whatever hours it takes, that's how many hours it takes. We're not after hours. Okay. Any plans completed after the project proposal has been approved by the council or district are between the scout and the beneficiary. They should not be required by the district or the board of review. There's a middle section in the Eagle Scout project workbook. The first section is the proposal. The last section is the project report. This middle section is called the project plan. The project plan is between the beneficiary and the scout. It is enough stuff documented to get the project done. And that's their determination. It's not approved by district. So when we get to the district boards of review and we're looking at that, That's information for us that says, oh, okay, this is what the kid did on his project, but that's all it is. It's not something that we need to require. It's just additional information if it's filled in. He could have that whole section blank, and as long as he accomplished the project, it would be fine. Now, we encourage him to do it because planning is part of the job. But you can't say, well, you didn't do that section, so we're not going to approve the board of review until you sit down somewhere at a desk and fill that section in. That's paperwork. We're not teaching kids to be a bureaucrat. We're teaching kids to get the project done. So whatever planning was required, it may not have been something that he had to put in the workbook. He may not have had to put everything in the workbook. He may have done it half filled or something. But it's not something that we should say, well, you've got a requirement now to fill that middle section in. And it's just not there. No requirement for that. We talked more about that in the project proposal presentation that we did last night, so it's probably a good idea to review that presentation if you have any questions about that, because we did talk about that extensively and gave some good hints and tips, I think, for that. A good test of any project is to evaluate its complexity, look for elements of challenge and complexity for the scout at where the scout is. So for a young scout who's never led before, it may be very complex to lead just a small group of people. For a scout that's a born leader and he's led a lot of people, his challenge may be a much more complex project for him. It's something you can bite his teeth, you can chew on a little bit. If the project was completed and approved, and this is for the board of review now, okay, so the project was completed and approved and meets the Eagle Scout Requirement 5, which is the requirement saying you got to do a project. As Requirement 5 is written, then the project should be considered as appropriate. If a hardship or a poor use of time to fill in missing information in the workbook or obtain a signature of somebody who may be on travel or for some reason is just unavailable to sign it, then go ahead and accept the project as if, and the person's approved it, that this is usually the beneficiary. The beneficiary is on business travel. The scout can't find him to sign him off, but you maybe talk to the beneficiary on the phone. He says, yeah, it's a great project, it's wonderful, Maybe even the beneficiary sent a letter that says it's a wonderful project, and we're really grateful. So he's approved it as completed, and go ahead and accept the project as being approved. It's the project we require, and boards of review should use common sense. Did the project meet Requirement 5 or not? So boards of review really should look at Requirement 5 and understand what that is. The workbook should not be used as a basis for rejecting candidates based on technicalities that have nothing to do with the intents of the requirement. Like the contact sheet does not necessarily have to be completely filled in. It would be rare for a board to reject a project if the beneficiary and unit leader agrees the project was completely satisfactory. Okay, here's some example, at the end really, we're going to give you some example questions here. This is for the lower ranks, for Scout or Tenderfoot through first class. Talk about who's your patrol leader, what are your goals, how do you do first aid skills, that kind of stuff. And they get a little older, they're going to be doing a little more leadership, so how do you feel about exercising your position? What was your leadership position? What frustrated you as being a leader? What is a good job in a troop that you think you'd like to do? Things like that. And then when they get into palms, now they're leaders and they've been around for a while. So now it's a lot of, they're kind of like seniors in the troop, so you're asking them, what is their personal goals in life? What do you think the goals of the troop should be? what part of your scouting experience helped you the most, that sort of thing. At Eagle boards, again, we ran through a lot of what we're going to be talking about in the Eagle boards. Some of the questions, though, you could ask them is how are they going to give back to the troop or back to scouting, especially if they're getting older and going off to college. What do they think their future is like? Some resources, and then we'll go, and then I'll. You guys can either ask questions by writing them in the chat window, or I will open up microphones as well. It's easier if you write them in the chat window, and we can cover them there. I will be, if you send to an email to this address and ask to be put on the advancement list, there's a council advancement mailing list, I will be sending to the council advancement mailing list links to where these slides are, and links to handouts like this handout here, notes for Eagle project approvers, unit leaders, and boards of review, which help for, this would be for Eagle project reviews. And this link here actually links to Chapter 8 of the Guide to Advancement, which actually gives you all the meat of how to do a board review. So it's kind of like your handouts for this briefing. So if you send to that email, I'll get you on the list. Just tell me you'd like to be on the list, and Friday I'm going to send out all those links to people. So are there any? I'm opening up the mic, so we're going to hear some background noise. If you're not talking to me, go ahead and put yourself on mute. And is there any questions that anybody has? Well, that didn't work too well. We got a lot of feedback from someone. So, if no one has any questions, if you have a question, put it in the chat window. If no one has any questions, I'll go ahead and adjourn. Oh, here's a question. Okay. The question comes from Marshall, and does a Scoutmaster have to accept requirements signed off by a different unit if the scout seems to demonstrate zero aptitude for the particular skill? It would, requirements, no. Rank, yes. If he has passed it, so that's kind of the demarcation line. So if he's gone through a border review at the other unit and he has earned star, then you have to accept the star rank. National has to accept it. I have to accept it. Everybody has to accept it. If he was signed off on a star requirement, but he has not passed the star rank yet, you could ask him to retest at your unit so that you are confident that he has satisfied the requirement. So Marshall, I just unmuted you. Is that what you were asking? Marshall? Oh, maybe I didn't unmute you. I thought I unmuted you. Oh, I see. You're not online. You're not on there. Okay. So we'll go ahead. Kathy is asking, Eagle boards of review, scouts that turn 18, do they have to be on the troop roster for that board of review? The answer is they have to be registered, which would be on somebody's troop roster, they have to be registered at the time that they have earned the requirements, and that includes the Scoutmaster Conference. So if they did the Scoutmaster Conference this year, they have to be registered this year in somebody's unit. Now, it doesn't have to be a particular troop. It could be in somebody else's troop because they're actually going to go through district to get approved. So, Kathy, I'm going to unmute you. Does that answer your question? I'm not hearing Kathy. I hope that answers the question. Mary Sue and Jim Clark are asking, if an adult has signed off on a requirement, then the scout says he did not really do that, I saw it, can the adult take back the sign-off? The requirement is, he has to have done the requirement that the requirement says to do. So if it says he has to do something, and if he didn't do it, then he didn't do it. He didn't do the requirement. It doesn't matter if it was signed or not. So the board can say, well, he wasn't signed. Or the adult can say, hey, you know, I don't know why I signed this. It was a mistake. I shouldn't have signed it. Mary Sue or Jim, I unmuted you. Does that answer your question? Well, this works fine from my end. I can talk all night. It's not good to anybody else. Oh, Kathy has no mic, but yes. Thank you, Kathy. And you don't have a mic either, Mary Sue. Okay. So hopefully that answered your question. Any other questions out there? Okay, so the next, one just popped in. Hold on. Okay, Kathy. So if you have any questions that come up between now and whenever, feel free to send the questions to this email address, and I'm usually pretty prompt at responding to emails. I usually respond back the same day, and I'm more than happy to answer questions. I'd rather have questions answered before the problems happen. There is one more webinar that is scheduled, and that's for next week, and that webinar is on Merit Badge Counselor training. If you have not already received an invite for it, send me your email address at this email here on the screen, and I will send you an invite to it so that you know when it is. And feel free to share that with as many people as you want. Well, thank you everybody for attending, and have a great evening. Good night.